everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you guys are new here, my name is Nicole and it's really nice to meet you. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about my favorite books in the year 2021. I am overwhelmed by this video, but I'm also very excited. I can't believe it's 2022 now, that's pretty crazy. It was kind of weird because I couldn't get to just 10 books that I really loved, and I couldn't get to 21 books that I loved in 2021. So I had to settle for 16. Without further ado, I wanted to talk to you guys about all of the books that have kind of either resonated with me or made me happier or just kind of make me think about it a little bit longer. So if you're prepared for this, then let's keep watching. So I'm also just going to mention that when I talk about a book series, that equals 1 because the book series as a whole made me feel a certain type of way. And this is not in any kind of order, by the way. I love them all in different ways. The first series that I'd like to mention is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. When I tell you that I was invested, I loved the characters, I loved the story, I liked the world building. It was just so perfect to me, and I felt like I was in the Grishaverse. Could not put the books down. I think I read it in the span of like a couple weeks, maybe a month, but it was my world, quite literally, and I could not wait to see the Netflix show. It is probably by far one of the most impactful series that I've read. If we want to talk specifics, I really liked Shadow and Bone, the first one, and I loved Rune and Rising, the last one, although the ending kind of killed me a little bit. It was just phenomenal. This is completely subjective, but I'm just ranking books based on how they made me feel, and the Shadow and Bone trilogy, it became most of my personality, I'm not gonna lie. That is definitely up there. The next book that I'd like to talk to you guys about is Wild by Cheryl Strayed. This is a memoir about how after dealing with her mother's death, she went through a really dark place, and at the age of 26, she decides that she has nothing left to lose and she wants to go on a path to find herself again and heal, and she goes and hikes the Pacific Crest Trail with no experience of hiking and just kind of wings it and discovers herself and heals and loves and laughs and finds friendship and hope again. It's just such a beautiful read, and I actually had started reading it at home, but I decided to save it for my own family trek through the Green River in Utah. And I had never been camping before. I'm not a very outdoorsy person. I like to hike and I like outdoorsy things, but the thought of like camping for a week without a shower and without a bathroom really freaks me out. And so reading her journey and reading her thoughts and her struggles and her perseverance and optimism just really kept me going through the trip and really kept me in a positive mindset as well. I really could not recommend this book enough. If you are an outdoorsy person and you're looking for, you know, something to pull you out and get you back out into the wild, like this is definitely a great read. But for also people who are trying to find themselves again, this is beautiful. There's no words that can describe like what this book means to me. The next book that I'd like to talk about is In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park. In Order to Live is about Yeonmi Park and how her and her mother flee North Korea and find solace in China, only to be sold into the trafficking world. And it tells of their resilience and struggles into finally finding freedom in South Korea. It is an utterly heartbreaking story, and it's really crazy when you read it because you think it happened so long ago, but this is actually something that's still going on in today's world. It was just crazy because we're actually like very similar ages, and it was just very much a wake-up call for me. I think that everyone could benefit from this book. It's incredibly educational, not only towards what people in North Korea are going through or have gone through, but also just understanding more than what news shows you, like understanding the mindset, the brainwashing that goes on there. It was a phenomenal read, and I think that everyone could honestly benefit from reading it. The next book that I'd like to talk about is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. It was actually the first Kristen Hanna book that I've ever read, and when I tell you that I literally slid down the wall crying while my boyfriend was like, "Are you well?" We were literally on this like romantic road trip in the snow, and then I'm like sliding down like a wall crying. It was definitely a sight that I wouldn't recommend. This is a story about two sisters and their journey when the Nazis occupy France. I don't really want to give more away than that, but all I'm gonna say is that I have always loved historical fiction books. This one just took me for a spin. I remember reading the first 100 to maybe 150 pages, and I was like, okay, this is like good. I'm not like invested though. I don't really get the hype too much. And then stuff hit the fan, and by page 300, I literally could not put it down. This is a pretty thick book, I think. Yeah, it's like over 500 pages, but it's so worth the journey. And if you read this and you like put it down like 50 pages in, I'm just telling you, be patient, you'll understand. As you can see, I stickied it up, and actually at the time I did not have my stickies with me, and so I actually wrote down every single page so that when I came back home I could sticky it up. That's how passionate I was about sticking up this book. I actually recommended this to Jess from Book Past Bedtime, and she actually said it's her favorite book of the year, so I don't know, I think you should go read this. The next book series that I need to talk about, haha, is the Folk of the Air trilogy by Holly Black. Growing up, I loved the Spiderwick Chronicles. It was just such an imaginative, fantasy-filled world. Literally wished that one of those like sprites would come into my house and lead me to a magical realm, but that never happened. The Cruel Prince is about this girl named Jude, and at a very young age, her parents were actually killed, and she was taken away by her birth father to the land of the fairies, where she has to live, and they're very brutal and they don't like humans, and she has a hatred for the prince Carden, who's her age, and gives her a lot of nonsense and trickery. This whole series was just amazing. I had heard a lot about it, and I definitely am not the kind of person who always gives into hype. If anything, I feel like hyped up books make me a bit more nervous, because if I don't like it, it's just kind of awkward. I just kind of feel like I'm missing the party. But I loved this series so much, and I just felt like it got progressively better the more I read. And the third book, Queen of Nothing, was like my favorite book because it was so satisfying and it had the ending I needed and it was just perfect. So when I tell you that I plan on reading every book Holly Black has put out, that's happening. This was just such a wonderful book series. It's something that I think about a lot, and I will definitely come back to it. The next book that I really loved in 2021 was Verity by Colleen Hoover. It was actually the first book that I've read from Colleen Hoover, and I have heard that this book is pretty different than the rest of her stuff, but it was so twisty and good, and the ending had me shook. This is kind of like a romance contemporary kind of thriller about this struggling writer who meets this guy, and it turns out that his wife actually is a famous writer and she's not doing so well, so he needs to hire someone to move in and finish her best-selling novels. So the struggling writer comes in and a romance might develop with the husband, but also she discovers a manuscript that may or may not have an autobiography of horrible things written by the sick wife. So it's kind of like a morally gray, you don't really know who to trust kind of thing. It was so good. I could not put it down. I think I read it in one sitting. It was completely worth it. It was worth the day. The next books that I want to talk about that I loved. Six of Crows duology. So Six of Crows duology is about a group of misfits, thieves, murderers who decide to collaborate and pull off an elaborate heist. I was not sure if I was gonna like this, but oh my gosh. I love multiple POVs because I feel like you get to understand the character a lot better as a whole, and it's not just like one person perspective, but I feel like you really got to know all these characters and their backstories, and the more you read, the more you learn about them, and it's just wonderful because you feel like you're getting to know a friend. It was a very wonderful, adventurous read. Definitely very intense. The only thing I have to say about this duology is that I have just kind of recently realized that I'm the kind of person that needs to finish a series very close like after I read it. Otherwise I really get out of this world. And so I like let there be a lot of time before I finished the duology. I think that going into this year, I definitely want to read it again because I don't feel like it had quite the attachment that I was hoping for, and it wasn't because of the writing, but it was just because I was not being really consistent with it, and so I was in a completely different headspace when I started the second book. The next book that I want to talk about that I loved this year was Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. Oh my gosh, this is such a cute book. It's like a paranormal romance. It's about Yadriel, whose traditional Latinx family won't accept his gender. He decides to prove that he's a real brujo, where I think they guide over ghosts into the afterlife, but he accidentally awakens Resident Bad Boy Julian. Julian agrees to help him save his cousin if Yadriel helps him discover who killed Julian, and it becomes kind of like a romance maybe, but it's so cute. This year I've read a lot of duologies and trilogies, and so with standalone books sometimes it can be kind of hard to really build a world and have like a fleshed out like plot with just one book, but I felt very happy and satisfied with the book and I really don't have any complaints. As you can see, I had a lot of emotions about it and I would recommend it to anybody. I actually recommended it to my boyfriend's mom and she loved it as well. The next book that I loved was Acotara by Sarah J Maas. I have not read any of Sarah J Maas's books until this one and I would like to read it again before I go on to the next books in the series, but I just remember that I was reading like 150 pages in and I was like, okay, like this is good, but I'm not like in it yet. It's a 4-star read for me, and then it just got crazy and I could not put it down. It was so good, and what's even better is I actually really like the protagonist. That kind of thing is important to me because if you're just frustrated with the protagonist, it's kind of hard to get behind like rooting for them, but I just actually really liked Sarah. I don't really feel like I need to talk about this a lot because I feel like this is so hyped on BookShock, BookTube, Bookstagram. I did feel like it lived up to the hype, and I heard that this wasn't even the best book, so I'm really looking forward to reading the next books in the series and hopefully exploring more of Sarah J Maas's books. So the next book duology I'd like to talk about is The Vicious Duology by V.E. Schwab. I had previously read City of Ghosts and I liked it, but it is also middle grade. I didn't feel super impressed, but I was happy with it. Like I think I gave it like a 4 stars. My opinion of her and her writing changed though when I picked up The Vicious Duology. It definitely has a more of like a straight to the point kind of writing style, but I actually really liked it, especially reading from the main character's perspectives. It's about 2 best friends who set off to discover if they can become extraordinary, or they have powers like X-Men, and just kind of their quest to gaining powers and how they're going to change after gaining powers. I loved this duology so much. It's multiple POV, which I find very interesting, and there's a lot of like time jumping back and forth, which honestly I actually really liked. I know that not everybody likes that in their books, but for me it's really fun because you're kind of piecing together and getting a sense of the bigger picture as you're reading, which makes it really rewarding for me. Not only that, I feel like this duology really gives you great character analysis. I don't feel like the main character grew a lot, but it was just really interesting to see like their journey along the way. If you like Marvel, I feel like this would be a vibe. I also just really like this duology because I feel like it's really realistic as to what would actually happen if people got powers and like how the government would react, just how that would be. I don't think that it would be so good or bad. I think there would be a lot of morally great characters that want to just kind of focus on benefiting themselves. My voice is tired. Okay, so the next book that I would like to talk about is actually Brazen by Penelope Bagu, and this is a graphic novel that talks about women and their contributions to the world. This was actually recommended by Noelle from Noelle 7 Pages, and I did this for a reading vlog where I was reading her favorite books, but I actually really loved it. I spent a lot of time reading it, and I feel like graphic novels can be pretty quick reads, but there was a lot of content in here and it was just so educational. It was really surprising and kind of sad to me that I really don't know that much about a lot of women who've contributed in history, and just reading this was just wonderful because I finally was like learning more about women who are making a difference, and I just realized how male-centric a lot of history is. So I think this is actually a very necessary read. If you like fun artwork and you like to learn about things, read this. It's really awesome. I would never part with this book. The next book that I'd like to talk about was Too Good to Be True by Carola Lovering. This is about a man. It talks about 3 different perspectives, his wife and his fiance, and it's just kind of you piecing together what's happening. Why is he married and trying to bamboozle this like fiance? Like, is he have bad intentions? Who's the master manipulator here? I went into this thinking it was going to be a domestic thriller, and in some ways it is, but I also feel like it actually should be like categorized as more of like a contemporary romance also with a thriller kind of aspect, because it wasn't really slasher. There wasn't a ton of intensity. There wasn't a lot of violence, and I actually really enjoyed it. I thought that the storytelling was great. I liked the characters and how multidimensional they were. They had different motives behind being why they were, and also there's like representation for obsessive compulsive disorder, and it was really nice to have a POV that deals with that and what that's like. But I just really enjoyed this book a lot, and it was definitely not what I was expecting, but it was really fun, and it's something that I would come back to in the future for sure. The next book that I have is A Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. I actually recently read this and I absolutely loved it. It's about this couple who's kind of going through some struggles. The wife wins a getaway retreat to Scotland in the cabin in the middle of nowhere, so they go to this really beautiful retreat. The husband actually deals with facial blindness, so he can't really recognize faces, divorces, and the wife has been writing letters to him for some time now, and there's some chaos, and maybe one of them might not be returning from the cabin. So it's a thriller. If you like isolated settings and domestic thrillers kind of vibes, this is like the perfect thriller for you. I'm gonna tell you right off the bat, if you read it 200 pages in and you're kind of, okay, it's good, but I don't know what the hell is going on, just keep reading, because by the end of the book, you're gonna be like, okay, I get it. I get the hype. I just remember reading it and I was like, I'm so confused. But then it just got so good. I read this in one day, could not put it down. It was such a fun time. There are so many twists and turns, and it really keeps you confused and on your toes. I don't think I've been this caught off guard in a long time. I understand why it's hyped up. The next book I want to talk about is Lore by Alexandra Bracken. And I cannot believe I read this last year. It feels like I read this like forever ago. But I actually buddy read this with Catherine Zofria and Em from Bookish Potatoes. Look at that. It's beautiful. I think that we all enjoyed it. I think I might have enjoyed it the most. It's a very interesting book about this girl named Lore, and her parents were brutally murdered when she was younger, so she kind of stays away. But every year, all the descendants of the Greek heroes get together in their clans and try to kill a god, because every year the gods are forced to walk as mortals for a week, and then the heroes can kill them and gain their powers. And so it's just very brutal and interesting, but I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really good, and I remember reading it page 200 and I was like, okay, this is good, but I'm not feeling it too much. And then I got to part 3 and stuff hit the fan. I was invested. If you guys like Greek mythology, this is the book for you. It's really action-packed. I cannot recommend it enough. The next book that I want to talk about that I loved in 2021 was One to Watch by Kate Stayman London. I was not really expecting much of this. I thought that it was just going to be like a rom-com kind of read, but I was really surprised with the amount of depth that there was in this. This is about a girl named Bia, and she's a very popular plus-size blogger, influencer. She ends up getting her heart broken, and she is actually asked to be the host of the newest Main Squeeze show, which is basically like The Bachelorette, where a bunch of guys come to compete for a woman's affections, and then she picks someone that she wants to like marry. And so she decides to go with it, not taking it super seriously, but maybe she could find love after all. Like, this book surpassed my expectations. I think I might have read it in 2 days. It was so brutal and hard to read at times. Like, I was just getting so mad at this book. It's not even fantasy. Like, I could really see people being this horrible, but I think it's a really important read, and it has a very heartwarming ending, which I really, really loved. It just talks about her journey to like loving herself. It was definitely just a lot more intense than I thought it was going to be. I wouldn't even say it's like a rom-com. I would say it's like a romance contemporary. I think that it is a really great book, and I think that everyone could benefit from reading it for sure. The last book that I want to talk about is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This book was recommended by Jess from Books Past Bedtime. I actually read it for a reading vlog where I was taste testing her favorite books. This is about Carmen, so this is a memoir, and her abusive relationship with her ex-girlfriend. It is probably one of the most unique books that I've ever read because it doesn't have your standard storytelling kind of format. It talks about it in like different types of writing, which is really hard to explain, but I would just highly recommend checking it out. As you're reading these different writing styles, you're trying to piece together the story, what happened between them, and it's extremely powerful and heartbreaking. I think that a lot of people who have dealt with emotionally abusive relationships can probably identify with this book, but also I think it brings light about how there's not a lot of discussion about abuse in female-female relationships, and I think that this like definitely highlights the importance of bringing awareness to that. It was really hard to read for me. I've been in a very emotionally abusive relationship before, and I could really relate to a lot of the emotions that Carmen was feeling. I think this is a very important read, either for someone who's healing or someone who just wants to be like more educated, because I think that this is so important, and abusive relationships are a lot more common than anyone really gives credit to. So yeah, those are all the books that I wanted to talk about that I loved in 2021. Some honorable mentions that I didn't talk about were Where the Crawdads Sing, as well as The Magic Fish, and I really liked In a Holidays, but they just didn't quite make it to the top, but very close seconds. Would recommend those as well. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you've like kept up with me at this point, I would love to hear in the comments down below what were your favorite books of 2021. Going forward this year, I have a lot of hopes for what I'd like to accomplish, but I'm just really excited, and I hope that you guys enjoyed listening to me because this was really fun to talk about and film with you guys. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!